Hey everybody, Tekking101 back again. Barry is still... Oh wait, holy crap, Barry's back from vacation, everybody! Oh my god, Barry, it's so good that you're back. I don't know, man, the channel just hasn't felt the same since you've been gone. Views are down, subscribers are down, I was in a hole, but then you came back to save us all, Barry. I notice you don't have any souvenirs for me. Traveled literally around the entire planet. You went to Japan and Hawaii and Seattle and Egypt. You know how much I love ancient Egypt, Barry. Couldn't even get me like a little pyramid keychain. Okay, whatever. Anyway, it's good to have you back, buddy. All right, so I did a poll yesterday on my Twitter on what today's topic's going to be. I'm going to try to just do 3 videos in a row here for the next 3 days. A lot of stuff happened in the last chapter, okay? So the options, of course. Option number 1 was a video about Bartholomew Kuma, because we found out he was a member of a special race in the last episode, and we could have turned out that could be like a Lunarian or something, or it could have been something else, so we could talk about that. Then there was the whole thing at the end of the chapter, the last scene of the chapter, where we had Shaka, the aspect of Vegapunk's goodness, speaking with Dragon, okay? And so there's obviously something going on with Vegapunk and the Revolutionary Army. That was a theory that's been around for a while. I've talked about that at length before, okay? So that was the second option. And the third option was talking about the Cypher Pole Zero, because, you know, Lucci and Kaku and Stussy, they're coming to the island as well. Egghead, they're trying to land there and wipe out all of Vegapunk's satellite bodies and his main Stella body as well. And there's a Seraphim version of Kuma that's on the ship as well. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. So I did the poll, and it was very, very close, but Dragon just barely edged it out there. So I think it was like Dragon like 42%, and the video about Kuma being 40%. So I'll do the video about Kuma tomorrow, which actually makes a really good companion piece to this. I mean, they all sort of do, so because I feel like Oda... Everything, all of the different plot threads are starting to coalesce, and you sort of have to do that with a really long-running manga if you want it to end properly, okay? Like, you know, let's say One Piece lasts another... I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I mean, some people might think it might be less than that. Some people might think it would even be more than that. I personally would want One Piece to end in 2027, because that'll be the 30th anniversary. I don't know if Oda wants to go another 5 years with this, or if he has plans to end it earlier, but 30 years for this masterpiece of a manga, that'd be pretty awesome to me. So the idea is that if you're going to end this story in 2027, you got to start, like, you know, bridging the gap between a lot of these plot threads and tying them together. You can't start doing that like a year before you end the series. You got to do that years before, because I think we've all seen manga before that don't address these certain issues until like the 11th hour, you know, where it's like, oh man, this wasn't addressed at all, and then in like the last 5 chapters it's like, by the way, you know, this character's plot thread, blah 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 XYZ, okay, there it is, tied up nice and easy, let's go. And it's like, yeah, well, tied up, but tied up very quickly, and it's like it didn't really feel like so grandiose considering how much time was put into it, okay? So everything involving Vegapunk, Kuma, Bonnie, Cypher Pole, the Revolutionary Army, all of that is going to be tied up probably by the end of this arc. And I don't even personally think the Egghead arc is really going to be that long. I think it's mainly going to be here existing as exposition for setting up the final part of this story. So Egghead Island arc, I mean, it's only been like, you know, it's only been going on for like 5 or 6 chapters so far. So Zoe was even like a short arc, and that was about 30 chapters, I think. So maybe something like that with Egghead. But I think the Straw Hats have a lot of other stuff to do. So, yeah, we're probably not going to be here super long. But we got to talk about Dragon speaking with Vegapunk, okay? So this is great. Vegapunk, being a genius, pretty much has figured out that Cypher Pole is going to come and assassinate him, because he even says this to Dragon. He says, you know, being a genius, a problem with being a genius, Dragon, is I can kind of see my own future in a sense, or I can predict what's going to happen next in the world, okay? Because Vegapunk is an ultimate genius. He's a scientific genius. He's a biological genius. He's a political genius, probably. He's a genius in all different fronts. He's so much of a genius, he split himself into 6 equal geniuses, you know? Like, that's pretty genius. genius. All right, I don't know. Where do you think okay, where do you think Vegapunk ranks on like fictional character, genius scale? Like where is he compared to like Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty or Jimmy Neutron from Jimmy Neutron? You know what I mean? All these famous geniuses have shows that literally have their name in the title. We could just rename One Piece to Vegapunk. That's fine. The Vegapunk show. That's okay. Anyway, so where does he rank on that? But like he's smart enough to know that like, okay, I just created an army of robots that literally listen to my every whim, and those were just the pacifistas that were the prototypes. Now I've released another army of robots that are even stronger than the first generation of robots that have Lunarian DNA, and their DNA from the warlords in them, and he probably also, Lucci hinted that it's something to do with the Lulusia Kingdom as well. Now, I have no idea what the Lulusia Kingdom is. I've never heard of this in the story, but apparently it has something to do with that island being annihilated. So, yeah, obviously we saw Eam summoning the giant sky laser. I guess we don't know it's Uranus yet, so until we find out what that thing is called, I'm just going to call it Eam's sky laser, okay? So, regardless of whether or not it's an ancient weapon, Eam still has a sky laser. That's a problem, okay? So, Lucci hyposits that like, what if it had something to do with the Lulusia Kingdom disappearing? That's why all of a sudden we were given an order to go assassinate all of the Vegapunks, right? So there's been a theory out there that, yeah, Eam might just have an ancient weapon, but another idea is because, Vegapunk has already been, cloning devil fruit abilities, making, artificial devil fruits, and the whole thing with the artificial dragons, and the whole thing with, like, the Seraphim, which are basically, like, artificial clones of Lunarians. People have, like, well, what if he tried to create a replica of an ancient weapon? What if Eam or one of the Gorosei or somebody, like, they knew what the ancient weapons were, and they went to Vegapunk with the concept idea, and he created the giant sky laser that was used to destroy Lulusia? That would actually make a lot of sense, that weapon, even though how dangerous and scary it was, that weapon was not a proper ancient weapon. It looks so terrifying. It's more powerful than pretty much anything. It's basically like the nuke in the One Piece world. But wouldn't it be insane? It would be like a Madara Uchiha moment, like when Madara summons the giant meteor and then Onoki like stops it, and then Madara's like, but how are you going to stop the second one? And then Oki looks up. He's like, oh, and there's an even bigger meteor. You know what I mean? So how crazy would it be if we see that giant sky laser thing that's able to nuke an island in one shot, and it's like, oh, that's just the artificial one. And then it cuts above it where we see Eneru coming down from the moon, and like we have the actual Uranus, which is the actual moon. It's like Unicron. It's like transformed. And so the moon itself is an ancient weapon, and it's even bigger than that thing that nuked the Lulusia Kingdom. And it's like, oh my god, what if it was something like that? What if Vegapunk, like, Eam told him the concept, and Vegapunk's like, yeah, I could probably throw something together like that, giant sky laser that can obliterate an island. Yeah, give me until the end of the week. I can throw out some concept ideas. I can get it done. You know what I mean? So that might be the main impetus for why it's happening now, because the government has stated they've done purges before. They did a whole Purge franchise in the One Piece world, okay? And their movies they actually keep getting better as opposed to the Purge universe in our world, but whatever. Anyway, they've done these cleansings before, but the implication was they did these cleansings, like, periodically through the centuries. I mean, the world government's been around for like 700-something, 800 years. So obviously they wouldn't be able to do this like all the time. People would ask questions. So maybe every few centuries they have to do a cleansing or whatever. Now, they obviously didn't have access to Vegapunk's tech for most of the world government's run. It was even mentioned by Bonnie recently that she went to Egghead Island like 20 years ago when she was a little kid, and it didn't look anything like this. So that was like maybe when Vegapunk was just getting started on Egghead, when he just started working for the government, was maybe 20 years ago or some such, okay? So the idea is, how did the government do the cleansings before Vegapunk if let's say the sky laser was an invention by him? There was probably other methods they could have used. They are the world government after all, but this is the cleansing that they did with Vegapunk's technology, and now they have somebody else that's like, involved here. It's not just Eam doing something or the Gorosei doing something. Now Vegapunk's involved. I don't know. It might actually be the real ancient weapon. It could just be that too, and the government could have had that for the last 800 years, and maybe it has a recharge rate so they couldn't use it all the time or whatever. Or maybe Vegapunk's has to have a cooldown recharge period, but the actual Oranos does not have that limitation. Could be something like that as well. Anyway, so they're talking at the end of the chapter. Vegapunk, or rather Shaka, Vegapunk #1, is talking to Dragon, and he's saying that, like, I think I'm going to die soon, and Dragon's essentially like, hey, don't joke about that kind of stuff, and Vegapunk's like, I just wanted you to know, I have something I want to talk to you about, Dragon, and then that's the end of the chapter. And you know what's great about this, ladies and gentlemen? It's that I feel like Vegapunk is going to predict what the world government's plan is going to be before they could even predict it. So he's already predicting, like, they're going to send assassins to my island. They're probably already on the way. So the government thinks they have, like, they can deal with Vegapunk the same way they dealt with everybody else, every other dissenter in the world government's, like, little entourage, you know what I mean? Where Eam or the Gorosei could just order, like, have this person be assassinated, Cypher pulls 0, finishes them off, calls it a day, and, clocks out or whatever. No, they're not going to be able to do that with Vegapunk. Not only for the fact that there's actually 7 of the dude, there's 6 satellite bodies and 1 main body. Not even talking about that. It's just that Vegapunk's going to predict every single thing they're going to do before they even can think about it. It's like he's a chess grandmaster or something, right? The whole point of chess is, like, to predict your opponent's moves, turns and turns and turns ahead, so you know what they're going to do, you know their strategy. Vegapunk even says this to Dragon. He's like, I'm a genius. They're going to be sending Cypher Pull 0. He doesn't directly say Cypher Pull 0, but he's like, I know they're going to send some people at me. And maybe he's already kind of resigned himself to his fate, because he did say that I feel like I'm going to die soon. Maybe he has already resigned himself that maybe him, or maybe at least his main body's going to die. Maybe some of the satellites will live on, but he's like, maybe my main body will die. But he was talking to Dragon to sort of get, like, the next phase of his plan in order. It was like, Dragon, if I end up getting assassinated in the next few days, I want you to do this, this, and this. And here's the plan, and here's the data, and here's, like, a personal Seraphim army for you. Here's the kill code. Here's the command for all of the Seraphim. You enter this code, and they'll listen to whatever you say, and you have your own private army of Seraphim. Like, I can imagine Vegapunk giving all of that data, all of that information over to the Revolutionary Army, okay? Also, this was like a little bit of a side thing that I just noticed, but how is Vegapunk communicating with Dragon right now? Because they're obviously, like, Dragon is obviously not on Egghead. They're communicating through, like, well, what is it? Is it Den Den Mushi, or are they communicating through, like, radio? Because the thing is, obviously Vegapunk is 500 years in the future, so you could argue that Vegapunk, like, invented smartphone technology, or Vegapunk launched, like, satellites into orbit around the One Piece world, and there's like a telecommunication network, like, that he created and he has complete control of. You could argue that. Everybody else in the world is talking into psychic snails. He has an actual, like, phone network, okay? And there has been already, like radio networks exist in One Piece, but they're very, very sparse. The Germa utilize them, because I remember when the Germa went into their raid suits, they were communicating with, like, radio technology over their, like, earphones in their raid suits. But that's also done by Judge, who worked for Vegapunk, who would have similar tech, okay? So that makes sense that the Germa would have access to, like, radio technology. Vegapunk would have access to, like, radio telecommunications technology. Vegapunk might have the internet. Like, if anybody in the One Piece world has access to the internet, it would be Vegapunk, right? Okay, he just logs into the One Piece wiki, and he's like, all right, everybody, we're going to figure out what's going on here. It's like, there you go. I think there's I think the Marines do have access to radio network communications, but it's, like, all focused around Den Den Mushi. Like, there was the wiretapping division, which, by the way, the wiretapping division intercepted no message on this day, but there was the wiretapping division, and they have computers, and they were, like, listening in, but that was all stuff that was geared toward Den Den Mushi communication, like intercepting the calls on the psychic Den Den Mushi network and intercepting those and deciphering those. All of those machines and stuff are focused toward that. Meanwhile, Vegapunk might have a completely different frequency, a completely different, like, level of technology on how he communicates with Dragon. Dragon has, like, a Den Den Mushi that he uses to communicate with, like, his other commanders and, like, Ivankov and stuff. Just like, oh, Ivankov, how are you doing? Ah, yes, Dragon, hee-haw. It's like, okay, hold on a second, Vegapunk's calling. And then Dragon just takes out a cell phone. He's like, hey, Vegapunk, what's up, man? Oh, I got that text you sent me the other day. I got that thing you sent me, man. That was hilarious. Great meme. I love that you invented memes in this universe. The world was just a sad, sad place without memes. Anyway, you know, he's like, yeah, Vegapunk invented the One Piece subreddit. Of course. Okay. So, yeah, if that's the way that they're communicating, though, what I'm basically getting across here is I don't think the Marines or the government or anybody are going to be able to, like, intercept or hijack a call between Vegapunk and Dragon, or whoever Vegapunk wants to call. It would most likely be the most secure line in all of the One Piece world, given his, like, 500 years technology advancements, okay? So, yeah. Now, why exactly is Vegapunk working with Dragon? That's a question that's actually I've pondered for a while. You can pretty much connect the dots in the puzzle pieces that they've been working together. Just the fact that Kuma was a member of the Revolutionary Army and then Vegapunk worked on Kuma, that alone, you know, connects the dots there. But the question is Vegapunk helping out Dragon because it's the right thing to do? Like, you know, Vegapunk is actually sympathetic to the cause of the Revolutionary Army. He supports what they're doing. He supports the fall of the Tenryubito system, and he wants to help Dragon out as much as he can. Is he doing it for that? Or, as Vegapunk stated, you know, I'm a genius, I can kind of predict the future. What if it's less about his ideals and more about just being pragmatic, more about, like, continuing on technology? Like, Dragon, I can read the writing on the wall. You know, the world government as it currently exists, the Tenryubito system, their days are numbered. They're not going to be able to continue onward with this system. Eventually, either, you know, the revolution is going to take over, or eventually the people are going to revolt, or eventually the Tenryubito system is going to collapse under their own hubris. One way or the other, the Tenryubito system is going to collapse, and yeah, so I'm going to throw my lot in with the Revolutionary Army, not because I'm idealistic and I believe in the cause and the people and everything like that, but more of just because I can kind of predict that that's the way the tides are moving. Also, you got to imagine the world government would definitely stifle technological growth in the One Piece world. Like, Vegapunk is pretty much allowed to do whatever he wants on his own island. He can create all these things. And remember when Atlas was talking about how she was so frustrated that they couldn't get the technology mass-produced in the world because of so many limitations with funding and with resources. Let me ask you, does that really make sense? If the world government really supported Vegapunk and really threw all of their resources and money at Vegapunk's research, I feel like they could mass produce all of these things all over the world. You know, Atlas was complaining that, oh, the scientists don't understand the blueprints. We don't have enough money. Even that's the whole reason Lilith was attacking pirate ships, because there wasn't enough research funding, right? The Tenryubito are loaded. Why don't they just give the money to Vegapunk? I think the reason for that, they don't want Vegapunk mass producing his technology all over the world. I mean, the resources might be limited. I mean, they might be using some kind of technology that might not be available. I mean, they might be using minerals and stuff that's really hard to find. That's one thing. But, like, you know, you feel like if the world government really threw all of their support behind Vegapunk, they could mass produce some of his tech, okay? And they can't. Or that rather they won't, because they want all the technology for themselves, okay? And so the satellite bodies are all very brilliant, but they all embody a different aspect of personality. So Atlas's whole thing is wrath. So that's why Atlas was so frustrated, like, we can't get any of this stuff mass-produced. Nobody can figure out the blueprints. You know, that might be like that Atlas is completely consumed by wrath or rage or frustration. Meanwhile, we have the other Vegapunks that are a little bit more calm, like Shaka and I guess Lilith to an extent, although Lilith is evil and Shaka is good. You know, whatever. Anyway, and then there's the main body, which we still haven't met yet, okay? So it might be a situation like that. It might be a situation where Vegapunk is just like, hey, if I ever want my shit to be mass-produced, not his actual, but, like, if I ever want my technology to be mass-produced, the Tenryubito system has to fall and collapse. The world government has to be under new management. Dragon, you know, you're a friend. I wonder how they met. That's a big question. How did Dragon and Vegapunk first meet? Might have been years ago. It might have been when Vegapunk was still working for Mads, back when Queen and Judge were still in the picture, you know? So, there's a moment in this story that I wanted to talk about involving Dragon that's always kind of stuck in my head. It's like a very key moment for Dragon. It was during the Strong World Chapter Zero, release after Strong World came out, or right before Strong World came out. We see the scene with Roger's execution at Logtown, okay? And we see all the people around, like Crocodile was there, Moria was there, Doflamingo was there, watching the execution of the King of the Pirates. Shanks and Buggy were obviously there. And Dragon was also there. And after the execution of Roger, after Roger says, if you want my treasure, you can find it, matey. After it begins to rain and thunderstorm and everything, which actually might have been caused by Dragon, Dragon walks through the crowd, and he's wearing a cloak, and he doesn't have his tattoo yet. This was 24 years ago at this point. And he's just walking through the crowd. And I know Dragon always looks serious in pretty much every single scene he's in, but he looks particularly serious there. And he just walks away with the hood, and then that's it. And I always felt like that was a key, critical turning point for Dragon's life. Like, that might have been the moment right there where Dragon decided to form the Revolutionary Army. Now, there's a lot of other stuff with Dragon, like Dragon's wife, who's Luffy's mother, might have been a Tenryubito, might have had something to do with that. Maybe that's why Dragon is number one. So, like, all the Gorosei are afraid of Dragon because he might have inside information, kind of the same thing like why they were afraid of Doflamingo. Might have also just been like, hey, Dragon loved his wife, and so his wife died. Maybe she was like a very kind celestial dragon, and he's like, I'm going to do my best to like bring down the system or whatever. Might be something like that. But I feel like that execution of Goldie Roger right there, that was a turning point, a critical turning point for Dragon at that point. And this was over 20 years ago. So Bonnie said that she had visited the island around 20 years ago, but it might have been still after the execution of Roger. So maybe it was right around this time that Vegapunk was taken by the government and told, like, okay, we're shutting down Mads. Queen and Judge go their separate ways. They go to, Kaido's crew and the Germa, respectively. But then it's Vegapunk that's left, and Vegapunk ends up getting the island of Egghead and starts working there and starts building it up shortly after Roger's execution. Because of the Great Pirate Era happening, the government had to get on this. So the government's like, oh, great, now we have the Great Pirate Era to worry about. Okay, shut down that Mads organization, and let's bring Vegapunk over to our side, and then he could help us fight the pirates. There you go. And so it took a while to build all the technology. I mean, he wasn't making pacifistas on day one, but, like, it took a while, but he eventually got there. He had to take 20 years to, like, build up his island and everything like that, essentially probably starting over from scratch. Anywho, and I imagine also the government was a little bit skeptical about Vegapunk at first. Like, they probably wouldn't let him do whatever he wanted to do at first. It probably took a good 20 years for them to trust each other. And we could see they don't even really trust each other now because of the Cypher Pole going to assassinate him. But maybe it was at that point that Dragon reached out to Vegapunk and they became friends. They became colleagues. They became pen pals. And they started texting. They started texting and just like, hey, Vegapunk, what are you up to today? You know what I mean? And then so they started working on a plan together through these very secure channels that Vegapunk created. And they could basically talk about whatever. They could talk about overthrowing the world government. They could talk about building, not Cypher Pole. They could build Cypher Pole. They could build their own Cypher Poles. I mean, they really could. Vegapunk could. If he can make Seraphims with Warlord DNA, he can make Seraphims with Cypher Pole DNA. We could have a Lucci Seraphim fight against himself. That would be really cool. But no, we can make robots. We can make all these technologies. We can come up with plans for what's going to happen, later on in like the final stage of the revolution. I feel like that's a very critical thing. In fact, that might have been the reason why Dragon and Vegapunk were speaking already, because Vegapunk bringing up the whole, I might die soon, I might be assassinated, they were already on the call when he brought that up. So maybe Dragon was the one that called Vegapunk over the secure line and was just like, hey, the next step of the plan is happening. Or maybe Dragon wanted to know about Sabo. Dragon was like, hey, Vegapunk, they say Sabo was wiped out in the Lelucia Kingdom. What do you know about that, man? And maybe Vegapunk explained the whole situation. He's just like, oh, yeah, so they sent the Sky Laser to go obliterate Lelucia. And Dragon's like, I was worried of that, because I'm sure that even if Vegapunk did not build the Sky Cannon, what if that actually is like Uranos? Vegapunk would still know about it. Vegapunk would still be aware that there's an ancient weapon flying around the world nuking islands, right? And he would have told Dragon that. That's more information than regular citizens have. Regular people in the Marines don't even have that information. Even high-ranking officers in the Marines don't have that information. I don't even know if Sakazuki has that information. I don't even know if Sakazuki is aware that Eam even exists, and also that there's a giant sky laser, you know what I mean? Sengoku might. I don't know. Sengoku was a fleet admiral for a long time. He might know Eam exists, but even in that regard, I don't think so. And I don't think Sakazuki has any idea, right? So, although They might not know Eam exists 100%, but they're both really intelligent people. Like, Sakazuki is prone to anger, but he is an intelligent guy. They might be smart enough to figure out that, like, there might be someone else in the shadows manipulating the Gorosei. Like, they might be able to put that much together, but not like that there's actually a Shadow King that's been ruling over the world for maybe 800 years that may or may not be immortal or something like that. Might be a vampire, not really sure. Anyway, so, yeah, that might have been when Dragon and Vegapunk were discussing the Lelucia Kingdom. What happened to Sabo? Is Sabo still alive? Maybe Vegapunk installed, like, a tracker or, like, a health monitor, like, bio monitor or something into Sabo, and now he's like, oh, no, Sabo's still alive. His life readings are good. You know what I mean? They spiked a little bit there, but we're all right. You know, maybe it's something like that. I don't really know. Then again, I guess that can't be the case because then they would have found out about him long before the whole incident at Reverie. So I guess that's not the situation. But Vegapunk could create something like that. I mean, I don't think it would be out of his wheelhouse to make like a biomonitor or something, like a chip to, like, you know, implant into you to keep track of your you know, your health and where you are in the world. Anyway, so yeah, I think they're talking about the next move. Like, if I were to be assassinated, basically Vegapunk is like, okay, move forward with plan F if I die. You know, F in the chat. That's what you do. Plan F if Vegapunk dies. But Vegapunk might not actually die because at the end of the day, there's one unpredictable factor in One Piece, and that is the Straw Hats. More specifically, that is Luffy, okay? And I don't care how much of a genius you are, Vegapunk cannot predict what Luffy's going to do. So, Luffy showing up and the Straw Hats being there, that's probably going to throw a wrench into everything. That's probably going to take... In fact, I can even see a scene in this. I can foresee a moment happening where Vegapunk is like, I was a genius, and I could predict anything that could happen, and I thought I had a good handle on what was going to happen in this world, but then Monkey D. Luffy, you changed all of that, you know, with your pluck and determination and your straw hats. And then Luffy's like, oh, gee, thanks. You know, so it could be something like that, where it's like, you know, Luffy is the X factor, the unknown factor here that changes everything around. And I don't think Vegapunk's going to be assassinated. At least I don't think all of them are going to be assassinated. Maybe one of the satellites will die. Maybe that's part of the reason why Oda created 7 of them. Like, some of them can die without all of them dying, right? The main body might die. Like, the main body might actually die, but it doesn't matter because all these other bodies are clones, and Shaka probably, they all have the same similar intelligence as Vegapunk, if nothing. They do have individual personalities, but they all seem to be geniuses. You know, like, I think it was Edison and Pythagoras that had the power of, like, creativity and their knowledge, but that doesn't mean that, like, you know, Shaka is an idiot or Lilith is an idiot because, like, well, I don't have the intelligence, I got the evil part, you know what I mean? Like, that's not how it works. I think they're all fairly on the same level of being a genius. Maybe Vegapunk, the Stella body, is even more of a genius, but is maybe like this decrepit old man that can't even move, right? Anyway, but yeah, that's the video, just talking a little bit about Dragon and Vegapunk's connections and where this might go from here. There's a whole other aspect of this involving Kuma, but that'll be the next video that I'll hopefully get out tomorrow. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good to be back, Barry. And hey, Barry, while you were gone, we got done with Monkey Facts, and now we're on Narwhal Facts. Go to that intro.
Narwhals swimming in the ocean, pretty big and pretty wide, and beat a polar bear in a fight. Narwhal.
Love the theme. Narwhal swimming in the ocean. Man, anybody that remembers that back in the day, the internet was a fun time back then. It also reminds me of the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny. Yeah, good guys, bad guys, and explosions. Far as the eye could see. And only one would survive. I wondered who it would be. This was the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny. Angels sang out in an immaculate chorus. Down from the heavens descended Chuck Norris. He delivered a kick that could shatter bone into the crotch of Indiana Jones. He fell over on the ground, writhing in pain, as Batman changed back into Bruce Wayne. But Chuck saw through this clever disguise, and he crushed Batman's head in between his thighs. I'm not going to keep going with the song. That's where I'm going to end it right there. Okay, everybody, this has been Narwhal Facts. Have a good day. No, okay. Narwhals. Interesting thing about narwhals, there are some other things regardless of their horn or their tusk. Although I do want to bring up that because they do have this giant tusk coming out of their body, and because they live so far north, like, so if you lived in, like, fishing villages around Norway or Russia or Greenland, like, back in the day, you would know about narwhals because that's where they live. But for other parts of the world, they would be seen seen as like mythical creatures, and that's kind of part of like the whole 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea sort of thing, where not everybody is familiar with narwhals. So the idea of like a giant horned creature in the middle of the ocean seems like mythical, like a unicorn or something, right? So and a lot of times, actually, that was a plot in Vinland Saga, where they have to collect narwhal horns and then go to Greece and then sell them, because there they think that they're actual unicorn horns, you know? So that's like back in the day. Anyway, you know, around there, though, they will actually spend upwards of 5 months under the sea ice, kind of like in hibernation. They are whales, so they still do need oxygen. They still need air to breathe, and so they will surface in ice pockets in order to get, you know, air and stuff. They feed mostly on halibut, Arctic and polar cod, squid, and shrimp. It's mostly what they eat around there. And they can dive like upwards of at least a mile down under the ocean, so they're pretty resistant to pressure and things like that. Also, I don't know if the tusk would aid their descent in the water, like they're diving underwater. You have this tusk, maybe that's more like not aerodynamic, but more like water dynamic as you're like sailing down. I don't know, but that's where they live, and that's mostly what they eat and how they hibernate. And yeah, it was mostly an Ultimate Showdown fact, but whatever. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Tekking signing out.